Today on Word Jazz. What's going on, Tay?
Hey, did you just call me Tay?
Okay?
That's fine. That's fine. For all you listeners, my name is Taylor. You're listening to Word Jazz.
What's going on?
Taylor and Sam, or Tay and Sam. Today, World War I. All you history buffs, war history nerds, this one's for you.
Or anyone.
That's especially Sam's dad, right? Isn't he into that?
Yeah,
this one's for you, Sam's dad.
We're talking about a handful of expressions. Should we describe all of them?
I thought you were just going to give like a teaser for yours.
Teaser for mine. One of the ones I'm doing is Cooties, which actually originated back in World War I. But it does get kind of explicit, so that might be a draw for some listeners, but not for other listeners. I get that if you have family or kids or whatever.
Or if you're Sam's dad.
Or if you're my dad, I don't know if it's appropriate for you. Just be advised, this episode might get a little explicit, but
it's going to be fun.
It's going to be a fun one.
I don't even know what the explicit parts are, but I'm interested.
Oh, well, let's get into it.
Roll the thing.
Jazz, a short-form podcast about the etymology of words, slang, and expressions.
All right.
You want to just...
do we want to decide order?
We can decide right now. You just want to go back and forth, and I'll end with...
Cooties?
Cooties?
Okay, so let me do... should I start with booby trap or over the top?
Let's go over the top.
Oh, you want to start with over the top. All right, so over the top originated in World War I. As I'm sure you could never have guessed. So do you know what over the top means? You want to explain that to our listeners?
That's just like something's too much.
It's not reasonable anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the First World War, there was a lot of trench warfare, which means that people would dig out these trenches and then put all these people in these trenches with their guns. And that's why those wars were very bloody, because all these soldiers were in these trenches that were dug out. Their heads would be at ground level or something like that.
Yeah.
And when you wanted to go over the top, that meant you would be going over the top of the trench. Does that make sense?
So would they yell that to their like infantrymen, like, over the top, boys?
Yes, they would yell, over the top, lads, and best of luck. That's apparently what they would yell. As you can imagine, it wasn't amazing for the people who were doing that. You would oftentimes just get slaughtered. So.
Oh, you know what I would do? I would yell over the top, and I would just stay there.
You would stay there.
It'd be like when you go to a diving board, and you're waiting.
And you're going with your friend.
We're gonna jump on 3.
Yeah, but with a little more severe consequences, I think.
Maybe.
Maybe. So that's where it came from, and then eventually it morphed into people using it as to describe something that's excessive or foolhardy. And so the earliest record of someone using it in that sense I found was in 1935, and it was in Lincoln Stevens' letters. But this is what he said. I had come to regard the new capitalism as an experiment till in 1929 the whole thing went over the top and slid down to an utter collapse. And that's when it sort of morphed into meaning excessive rather than going over the top of a trench.
It sounds like he's lived through World War I, though. Maybe he has that expression in his mind.
Yes, well, that's where that expression came from.
Yeah.
It's just eventually it morphed into meaning excessive.
Okay.
Right cool. After the war. Yeah. And I guess in the 1980s in the UK, it's often shortened to OTT. You're like, Sam, that's OTT, man.
Bro.
OTT. Yes, what do you got, Sam?
I'll go with my next one here. I'm going to talk to you about Basket Case.
Oh,
which is another Green
I'm excited
Day song.
to hear about this one, actually.
We're just going through all the Green Day songs.
Was Over the Top a Green Day song?
No, Nimrod was an album.
That's right.
So I researched Basket Case, which we now know as someone who's kind of crazy, right?
I picture like you're crazy, like you have a crazy aunt somewhere and she's always confused about everything and just totally forgetting stuff all the time, and she probably drops her keys a lot.
What a basket case.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a playful, fun meaning for someone who's scrambled.
Doesn't have their life totally in order.
Yeah.
Maybe in a fun way, like kind of eccentric way.
It seems like I'm always talking to my family members about, they're such a basket case.
Yeah.
But the original meaning comes from World War One, which is this episode. Guess what? And it used to mean when a soldier had lost both arms and legs, and a doctor would carry them in a basket.
What? No. That's not true.
Back home. No, it was an expression. I researched this pretty hard. There was never actually any real life, scenarios where someone was carrying someone. There maybe was, but
maybe
they
just made fun of that idea of it.
Yeah, it was more of a literary device back from that time.
That's hilarious and also terrifying that someone with no arms and legs being carried around in a basket is why we call like our fun crazy aunt a basket case.
Yeah, and that's unknown.
Oh,
it popped up again in World War II, but it was still a metaphorical thing.
Mm-hmm.
It never was.
It never described your crazy aunt who drops her keys.
No.
When was the earliest record you saw of that?
It was like World War One.
Mm-hmm. Of the like basket case being scrambled?
No.
Where's the earliest case of like someone like your crazy aunt?
That's not known. It just kind of shifted since World War II.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. I think some history buff people will know that. I think probably my dad. Do you want to?
Yes. Okay. Next up, booby trap. Also World War One. Spoilers. This is a World War One podcast.
This isn't going to be our explicit one yet, is it?
No.
That's the next one.
For the future. So booby trap. Sam, what's a booby trap?
It's like Scooby-Doo.
Yes. That's what I always think of. Is Scooby-Doo.
They fall into...
Like maybe they trip over a wire or something and like water falls on your head, or you like fall into like a pit of spikes and then there's like snakes that are going to eat you or something.
Yeah.
Or like Indiana Jones. I think of Indiana Jones.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So booby trap is now like kind of a scary, like maybe you're walking through some ancient ruins and you step on the wrong tile and then a spike comes out of the ceiling and impales you. That would be a booby trap.
Do you ever think about those kind of movies? Like, do you think the Egyptians really had like torture? I don't know, like that crazy of booby traps to the point where
I don't know.
It seems like very Hollywood driven. That kind of.
It does seem Hollywood driven, but maybe it's rooted in truth somewhere.
It's like the stone switcheroo that Indiana Jones does.
Yeah.
And that turns out to like.
I mean, I'm sure nothing is quite as like sophisticated as like the Hollywood ones, but
yeah.
maybe I'm sure somewhere someone has made a tripwire and then had a pail of water fall on their friend and laughed at them. I did that as a child.
Man.
Maybe I shouldn't share that.
Saddest.
So yes, booby trap. It's a concealed, potentially lethal trap that you fall into. So the word booby has been around since the late 17th century, and a booby trap was actually a practical joke, kind of like the bucket of water that I did as a kid. Sort of thing. Right. And the reason it was called a booby trap is a booby is someone who's kind of dim, a little like not super smart. Yes, actually, I looked into that as well. The boobies, like a booby, like a not smart person is not named after the bird. The bird is named after a not smart person. Does that make sense? So boobies are like the bird with the blue feet. They're not the smartest birds. And so people called them boobies.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So booby trap, you're not very smart. You fall for a prank. And that's what it was until World War One. And that's when it got much more serious. At that point, booby traps were traps that could kill you.
It wasn't before.
People just use it to describe like a prank or a practical joke. But now, in World War One, it's a booby trap is like you have a landmine underneath you.
Okay.
Yeah. So a good reference, one of the earlier references I could see of that was in 1917, E.F. Wood, an intelligence officer. He said booby traps were sprinkled about the country in the form of bombs. So another reference to booby traps being lethal in World War I was from P. Gibbs in 1918 I'm going to say this so wrong, but brace yourselves, It was called From Bapume to Paschandale. I'm so sorry if those are words that are close to your heart.
I bet whoever made that is listening.
I know. I'm sorry. But he said, the enemy left booby traps to blow a man to bits or to blind him for life if he touched a harmless-looking stick or opened the lid of a box.
Okay.
So World War I, booby traps are not just for stupid people anymore. The boobies, the dim-witted humans. Now it's just anyone could fall for it. And it's not fun. It kills you. All right. Last but not least, Sam, cooties.
All right.
Were you afraid of cooties when you were little?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Was that a thing?
I remember talking about it in middle school. I was like, oh.
Really?
They got cooties. Like,
I always thought it was kind of dumb.
Well, yeah, but little. Like I remember in middle school, like there's like the two groups of dudes that would like, or little boys that would sit in one corner and be like, oh, pointing and be like, they got cooties. And then they're over there saying that we got cooties.
Oh, okay. I just thought the people who would joke about cooties, it was usually adults. They'd be like, oh, do they have cooties? And I'd be like, ugh. Yeah, adults.
I can remember my mom saying like, oh, cooties, oh. Like,
yeah, as a joke. And you just kind of roll your eyes.
Well,
that was my childhood.
I actually think like our parents, it was more common for them to say cooties.
Maybe that would make sense.
Than our generation. Like,
do you know something insane?
What?
I learned that cooties are a real thing. It's an actual bug that exists, Sam. Exactly. I just learned that.
I'm going to talk about this.
Oh, tell me, yes.
Okay, so I found this very well-researched Slate article by Iva Chung. Cooties was a term members of the military used in World War I to refer to body lice that ravaged the soldiers down in the trenches.
Oh, God.
But that would...
That's gross.
They would like transmit diseases like typhus.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is terrifying. Some etymologists have proposed that the sense of cooties came from the word kutu, which was a word for louse in Malay and Maori in New Zealand.
Okay, interesting.
But it most likely came from the word cootie, which was a British word meaning infested with lice.
That makes more sense.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, so much sense. So the British word refers to a word coots, which meant a person was perceived as dirty and teeming with parasites. So the British origin is far more likely than the Kutu
that makes a lot more sense. Plus, the war was fought with a lot of people from...
Well, a lot of these are
Britain.
British. Like, I remember looking at other ones and seeing a lot of them being British ones.
No, it makes sense. Man, trenches were not good for anyone.
No.
People going over the top, getting slaughtered. People not going over the top, getting eaten alive by lice and getting diseases.
It was a bad time. Also, trench foot was a thing.
What's that?
Trench foot was when your feet would get so wet constantly.
Oh, and you get like disease and like rotting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like jungle rot.
Yeah, trench foot was just like rotting in the feet from being so
Yuck.
Wet all the time. But that's really all it was.
Yeah.
So cootie means infested with lice. Cootie relates to the word coot, which was used by the British as calling someone who has dirty, gross parasites on them.
Linus from Peanuts.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the right one?
I don't know. Coot comes from the Middle English cote, C-O-T-E, and the Oxford English Dictionary has a citation of lousy as a coot all the way back to 1864.
Wow.
So that's the first use of coot. So soldiers would come home with lice in World War I.
Yeah.
And that phrase kind of peaked in the 1920s, and then it kind of died down after that.
Uh-huh.
Around the mid-20th century, cooties was a pretty lighthearted expression.
Yeah.
Used by a lot of
elementary
children.
Schools, kids.
Most likely the reason why it was used that way is because it was paired with a lot of words that were a lot more explicit during that time.
Oh.
So during that time, for example, like the word coochie came from the word hoochie coochie, which was an erotic dance from the late 19th century, which gave us the shortened cooch in the mid-20th century, which is, a euphemism for female genitalia. Along with that list is cooch, koozie, and cooter. All these words have very similar explicit meanings, but they all have this coo part in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The cooch, koozie.
Like they all look similar.
Yeah, they all look similar in their pairings of letters. That's an example of a phonous theme. A phonous theme is a systematic pairing of form of meaning and language. So even though these words all have sort of different meanings and on
different
a different
histories,
and different histories, and they're kind of changing on a scale of explicitness. You know, there's cooties here, which is pretty lighthearted and used by children.
Yeah.
So like cooch, which is a like very
a little more hardcore.
like hardcore. I
don't know if it's
like,
very
I think
hardcore.
I think of it like what I don't know. Like it's like a bad word almost.
Yeah.
I think it's a bad word.
Like I wouldn't say that in front of my mom.
No,
Or
exactly.
my dad. Or my little sisters.
But even though these words are all different, they have very similar etymology. So that's kind of an example of phonous theme. How cooties are expressed today are very likely derived from that family. And for whatever reason, I think North American kids just kind of grasped onto that. I don't know why.
I think it's because when you're like an elementary schooler, you just
You want to hint at that kind of
you kind of
dirtiness,
you're kind
maybe.
of you don't know anything about anything, you know, but you know girls are different than boys and boys are different than girls. You don't really know why necessarily, but you know there's a difference. And since you're in elementary school, you like to, you know, kind of poke at things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no.
Like you kind of like push your
lines
limits a
and
little
boundaries.
bit. Yeah, just kind of figuring out where the boundaries are. And so you, I don't know, enjoy
like
making
everyone
fun
in
of
Mills-
girls or enjoy making fun of boys. And you don't know why you like to do it, but everyone else does it. And so it's okay.
I feel like middle school is just a training ground for little kids to see how much of a jerk they can be. Yeah, and I think that's why Cooties is kind of in there, is because it's kind
I
of
feel like
pushing.
Cooties is younger than middle school, though.
It is, but I think it's like pushing that idea, like when you're getting older, you're maybe getting less innocent and,
That's true.
you know, maybe taking the joke out on someone else more.
Yeah. Maybe.
But then again, like on that
I don't know,
whole
I think-
scale of things, Cooties is a lot more innocent and unknowing than, say, something relating to female genitalia.
Yes. I wonder
have
if
to say about
also,
it.
I wonder if also it's related to like little kids getting all these messages that like that girls and boys should like each other and go on dates and all these things, but they're you know in 5th grade, and so they're not into that
grossed
yet.
out, yeah.
Yeah, they're grossed out by that. They're like, why would anyone like doing that? And so that's why it really catches on, because it touches a chord there.
Yeah, no.
They're
I
like,
think-
oh, that's gross. They have cooties. It's like a word for how they feel about that.
Yeah, no, it just encapsulates that for sure. Let's call that good.
All right.
It's going to be
Listeners, you're all beautiful. Enjoy the rest of your week.
and don't get any cooties while you're out there. Also,
Don't go in any trenches.
please don't start World War III while we're gone.
Yes. Please don't do that either. Because then we'd have to make another podcast about World War terms. We don't want to do that. We only want to do 1 and 2.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we'll see you later, guys.
Bye. It's like we're still recording that.
See you later.
Bye.
I will see you next time.
On the flip side,
We're Jazz.
I liked the head tilt.
Hey, it's Sam from Word Jazz. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to your podcasts. We also have a Patreon. You can subscribe to us at patreon.com/wordjazz for a $1 monthly membership to help us grow. Thanks.